With the release of Marvel Studios' The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I decided it's time for me to tackle a project that I've had on the back burner for a couple years now, and that is a full metal Captain America shield. I've wanted one of these since I was 5 years old, and today we're going step by step on how to build one. We're going to start off with 24 inches of spun aluminum. There's a lot of options online. This is just one of them. Also, 2 cans of metallic paint. This is special paint, we'll get into that later, and then some frog tape. All right, our first step is to remove any grease or oil and dirt that's on the shield. You can use any degreaser. Here I'm using mineral spirits, but we just want to make sure we have a nice clean shield. Our second step in cleaning the shield, I'm going to use Windex. You can use soap and water, but we want to remove any excess mineral oil or anything that's on the shield. I'd recommend using a soft cloth here. We don't want to scratch the shield. If you find any blemishes in your shield, you can use a scrub pad. Just go along with the brushed metal. Otherwise, it won't look very good. You might make the problem worse. All right, next we're going to tackle the star. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use some frog tape, and we're going to tape off the star because we plan on painting the center. So I'm going to use frog tape for this project, and you can really use any masking tape, any blue tape is fine, but frog tape really does prevent bleed through. So on a project like this, I will gladly spend the few extra dollars on the frog tape to make sure it turns out well with no bleed through. Now we have a covered star. I'm going to run my thumbnail around the perimeter of the star so we have a nice guide to follow when we're trimming the excess. As we begin to trim around the perimeter of the star, I highly recommend getting a very sharp X-Acto knife and some spare blades on hand. Cutting against metal can dull these blades relatively fast, and you want a very sharp blade to cut the perimeter. Mistakes can happen very quickly, so I recommend being patient and really take your time with this. All right, now we have a completely covered star. Take caution around the edges of the star where the points are. Those places can be pulled up relatively easy, and you may not know it until you're already painting. So be careful around those areas. Now we're going to be tackling the main body of the shield. We don't have to worry about the center, and we don't have to worry about the first or the last ring. It's that center ring that needs to be masked off. So this is going to be the exact same process we did for the star. We're going to be using frog tape. We're going to tape off the first and the last ring, and then we're going to go around it with an X-Acto knife and really mask it off. Just take your time with this and be patient. Okay, now that we have majority of the ring taped off, we're going to do the exact same thing we did with the star. I'm going to take my thumbnail and run it around the perimeter of the shield so we have a nice channel or a nice guide where our X-Acto knife can follow. All right, I'm going to follow that groove, that channel that we marked out with our thumbnail with a very sharp X-Acto knife. So this is super time consuming, but just stick with it. It's really easy to get off that groove if you're not paying attention, so really you do have to focus for this. I'm going right in the center of the groove, the channel, and just chipping away at it. Like I said, it's time consuming, but just think about how good it's going to look once you're finished. So as you pull tape away, you may notice a few blemishes or a few spots where the tape just didn't come up right, or maybe you didn't cut the tape well enough with the X-Acto knife. That's okay. Right now is when we want to catch those mistakes. So you can just put a piece of tape over it and then recut it with your knife. You don't want to get to the painting stage and realize you made a mistake and have to strip the whole shield over one little mistake. I did find a few blemishes when I was pulling tape away, but it was no big deal. I slapped a piece of tape over it, ran my thumbnail over the channel, and then recut it again with the X-Acto knife. I went over the shield one more time before I moved on to the outer ring. finishing up the outer ring. I didn't find any mistakes or any blemishes, and I'm pretty satisfied with the tape job on the inner ring. So at this point, we can move on to painting the shield. This is going to be the fun part. I highly recommend painting your shield vertical rather than horizontal. It just makes life a little bit easier. I'm using Duplicolor metal cast in red and blue. You can find this in the automotive section, but this should go on very, very light. This is probably taken 5 or 6 coats. We don't want to oversaturate the shield with paint because we still would like that brushed metal look to shine through the red and the blue. So I'm just touching it up at this point. I'm pretty much done with the red, and we're going to move on to the blue. Alright, same process we used for the body of the shield. We're using Duplicolor metal cast in blue. We're doing 5 to 6 different coats, and I'm waiting about 15 to 20 minutes in between coat to make sure the paint really sticks. But we don't want to oversaturate that metal because we really want that texture to shine through. Now we're moving on to the back of the shield. These are brackets. I highly recommend that you check your reference photos and then check them again. Now I'm going to mark them with a dry erase marker. I'm going to rough up the back of the bracket with some sandpaper to give that epoxy something to stick to. I'm using a simple 2-part epoxy that I'm applying to the back of the bracket. It says it sets in 5 minutes and gives a full cure in about 16 hours. So having set for about 24 hours, we have both brackets installed on the back of the shield, and they should be fully cured at this point. Before we set the star on the opposite side of the shield, I decided to run a piece of blue tape down the center of the shield, so when we flip it over, we can place the star and center it a lot easier. Now I'm using the same 2-part epoxy I used on the brackets, and I'm going around the perimeter of the center. I'm not putting it in the groove because chances are if epoxy gets in the groove and we place a star, it's going to squish the epoxy out of the sides of the star, and we definitely don't want that because that will ruin the paint job. So I'm going to move the star in place. I'm going to center it up with the blue tape that I have, and then I'm going to let that sit for about 24 hours. Alright, here's the finished product. 24 inches of spun aluminum painted with red and blue Duplicolor metal cast paint, all put together with 2-part epoxy. This is one of the most satisfying projects I've done. As I said in the beginning, I've wanted one of these shields since I was 5 years old. I was a huge comic book fan, a huge Captain America fan, and the way that the paint shines, the metal shines through the paint, the way you can see the brushed metal through the paint, this is a super satisfying project, and I highly recommend building one yourself. So, if you have any questions on building your own shield or any materials, please reach out to me, let me know. But thanks for hanging out with me and checking out my video.